Quick gut check. Of the last 10 buyers you worked with, how many actually closed with you? If the number is under 4, this is not a buyer problem. It's not a market problem. It's a you problem. And we're going to fix it in the next 30 minutes on this podcast.
Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. This is the #1 daily radio show for realtors looking for a no BS authentic real-time coaching experience. What's really working in today's market, how to generate more leads, make more money, and have more time for what you love in your life. And now your hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
All right, so here's what we're going to do on today's show. We have you for 20 or 30 minutes, and we're going to go through a high level of what you should be doing when working with every buyer. I would say probably maybe 10% of you are doing all these things correctly. And it's an easy mistake to make. And I'll start out with the first mistake a lot of agents make is, frankly, after they generate the buyer lead, they're not fully pre-qualifying the buyer lead. Now I'm going to go over Jules and I will go over some of the questions in our buyer pre-qualification script first. But I remind all of you that the outline for today's show, a lot of the scripts are only available on our newsletter, which is harrisrealestatedaily.com. So if you've not subscribed to harrisrealestatedaily.com, it's easy, it's free, it takes 2 seconds to do it, harrisrealestatedaily.com, or you can just click the link below. All right, Jules, so let's get into this. So when they're pre-qualifying buyers, some of the things that we have a buyer pre-qualification script, right? Premier Coaching clients, or those of you who are a member of our EXP Realty family who are also in Premier Coaching, will easily find this just in the first level of Premier Coaching. What Julie and I realized, I'll give you kind of the educational background and they'll give you some actual script elements. What we realized early on when we were selling real estate, by mistake, by the way, is that we weren't asking the buyers early on enough in our conversations with them a bunch of very core questions, very important questions. The first one being that they have to, that we want to know if they have a house to sell, right? Because a lot of the buyers that we're working with, we would find, and this is when we were first in the business and we were learning on the job. We had no coaching or training or anything like the rest of it. So we were, friending them basically, getting them to want to work with us, entertaining them, trying to provide great levels of service, but there was no professional system or organized approach. And then one day, on accident, we asked the question along the lines of, by the way, which house are you thinking about selling in the neighborhood? So let me take this from the top of the script, but I'm wanting to frame it so you guys can have your minds open to the reality that depending on the price range of the house that you have for sale or that the buyer's calling about, there's probably about an 80% chance that buyer is actually a seller. In other words, they can't buy without the sale of their home. So ring, hello. Or actually, let me think about which way I want to do it. I'll just do it the way I was doing it. Ring, hello. And they'll say, I'm calling about 123 Elm Street. And I'll say, well, that's a terrific property. Everyone's calling on that one. By the way, which house in the neighborhood are you thinking about selling? Or I'll say something like that. Ring, hello. Hi, I'm calling about 123 Elm Street. Oh, that's a terrific property. Getting a lot of calls and questions about that one. Let me make sure it's still for sale and getting any of the current information about the property. And while I'm doing that, quick question for you: which house in the neighborhood which house in the neighborhood are you thinking about selling? Now, you guys can vamp on that a little bit, but what I want you to remember to do is you need to find out if that's a seller right at the top of the buyer pre-qualification script, not after you've set a buyer appointment, after you talked about all the things you have in common and fake friend them. That's where you are making a mistake, because many of these, especially when you put a sign in the yard for the first time, many of these buyer calls are actually neighbors checking the price or actually.
Okay, I have to hover you there. Okay.
Yeah.
Because this is a little known fact on many levels. You could forgive a new or newer agent for not automatically knowing that. That's something you come to, as we did, kind of the hard way. However, on the upper end of the scale, agents that have lots of listings and lead with listings sometimes blow off their sign calls. Yep. They don't even return their sign calls. So where's that mistake fall in? It's because they're missing listing leads. So here's the rule. Many sign calls, home brochure calls, whatever, even some internet inquiries that look like buyer leads and certainly could be buyer leads, are listing leads in buyer's clothing. You don't know unless you ask.
And they can't be buyers unless they sell their house. So you're going to spend all your nights and weekends and effort trying to get them to buy a house and only to find out that they can't buy unless they sell their property first. And so you've just wasted a bunch of your time, which, Julie, I think you'll agree. The next thing we need to make clear to all of these guys is, and yes, we love buyers. Don't get me wrong with what I'm about to say, but there is no such thing as a buyer that has to buy. Okay. I want you to be really clear about that. So you are going to work with buyers. You're going to be highly selective in the buyers you work with. They're going to have to have, frankly, they're going to have the highest motivation you possibly can as a buyer. But even the most motivated buyer doesn't have to buy. Julie, can you help me explain to them why that's true?
Well, so there's many different levels to this, but somebody who's renting can just renew their lease.
Yep.
They can extend it for 30 days. They can go month to month. They can renew it for a year, 2 years, whatever. A relocating executive often will have the opportunity to stay in executive housing, or maybe they're not even going to take the job once they see where they have to move to. That can happen too. Okay. Older people can keep the house that they have. That's a tough one, is when they're going to downsize and they've got a perfectly good house. They can move in with kids. Kids can move in with parents, and they can certainly, in every case, just decide to do nothing, and nothing particularly bad will happen.
Not enough space in the house. Well, you can, they add on. Well, no, this is buyer, right?
Get a
So
time.
yeah, a buyer, right? A buyer can finish the basement, or a buyer can do a room addition, or they can put, who knows? They're all. The point is that buyers never actually have to buy. They can stay put. They can keep the situation the same, and that means that if you're, frankly, putting all your best efforts every single day, your whole livelihood is dependent on your ability to sell homes to buyers. You got to understand. Now, I know today's podcast is about working with buyers, but I want you to understand there'll never be a buyer that's as motivated as a seller, because a seller, there are really very distinct reasons why a seller has no choice but to sell the house. And so a buyer always has a choice. They can change their mind, and they often do. That's what makes working with buyers so frustrating. In addition to that is the insanity that so many of you are buying your buyer leads. So you would have to have like 10 buyer leads, to the point of, when we started today's show. Some of you guys are starting out with 10 buyer leads. Half of them you're paying referral fees on. Two of them end up buying. But if you look at the amount of time and effort you're putting into all of that work, all of that frustration, all of that hope, all of that disappointment, right? You have been much better off learning how to be a listing agent. And again, I know today's show is about working with buyers, but I just wanted you to keep in mind that ultimately, if you want to have true leverage in real estate, if you want to last in real estate, you have to learn how to list homes. Because, Julie, give them some examples of sellers that absolutely positively have to sell.
A seller who has to sell has got a divorce decree. It's not up to them anymore. The judge has said you will be selling the house and splitting the proceeds. Someone who is taking a job in a different state or across, different town, going from Cleveland to Columbus, they have to take the job. They are not going to keep two houses at once. Probably they can't afford to keep two houses at once. They have to sell. Let's see, there's lots of flavors of financial hardship. Can't make the mortgage, can't make the second mortgage, can't make the tax lien. Sometimes the house is paid off and the taxes have gone up so much that they can't handle the property taxes.
California, Andy and Trent, you and I were working on this the other day. In Central California, the cost of insurance has gone up so much that people are, frankly, not able to afford. Even if they have the house paid off, they can't afford the cost of the insurance. Now, a paid off house doesn't have to have insurance. They can just basically be self-insured. But anybody with a mortgage now, their mortgage and the insurance has gone through the roof. So if you have a mortgage, your mortgage company is going to force you to pay for the insurance. And if you don't buy it independently, they're going to essentially force you to buy insurance from them and tack that onto the mortgage payment. And we're seeing, and Trent and Andy have been educating us about this, in California, around, north of Sacramento, you guys are experiencing a lot of hardship because you're going to be dealing with a lot of sellers, a lot of owners that are going to be forced to sell that don't really want to sell. And in some cases, because they can't afford the payment with the insurance, which won't be an option, they'll have to pay for it. So what's happening to those guys? They're technically not underwater, but they can't make the payment. You guys get the insanity.
And it's
of all
not an
this?
option to just not, you're not going to negotiate with your mortgage company. They're just going to add it to your payment. Even if you have it on auto draft, your next auto draft will just be higher because the insurance is a requirement.
Right.
So
it's written into your mortgage.
That's a tough situation. It's horrible.
It is horrible. It's written into the mortgage that way. So There you go. I mean, these are all, those are sellers that are going to have to sell.
But that's
'Cause
another example of a variety of financial hardship.
yeah, because there's a seller that could have afforded the house payment originally when they qualified it based on the, cost of insurance maybe 5 years ago. They've got equity in their property. They've done all the right things. But now all of a sudden, because of Cal Fire or whatever it's called, their insurance has gone through the roof. They cannot afford the payment plus the new cost of the insurance. They're not underwater. They don't technically owe more on the house. They just can't afford the payment. I mean, that is a nightmare scenario for homeowners
Horrible.
in that part of the world, but they have to sell. Those are going to be motivated
Right.
sellers, right? That's the
That's right.
point.
Now,
They're,
key difference too, comparing buyers and sellers. Those sellers don't have to qualify in any way to sell. There's no aspect to that. Your buyers are at higher risk because you might have the most motivated buyer in the world, but they are either not qualified to buy or not qualified to buy something that they would want to buy. That's a whole other can of fish that you have to put the buyers through. So that loops us back, right back to our buyer pre-qualification, just to keep this on the buyer topic.
yep.
So one of the, and that's, it's important to know why you want to really put your buyers through the grinder. Now, we were talking about which home in the area do you plan on selling? That covers your bases on several things. It can lead to, do you have to buy before you can sell? Okay. But by asking them in this way, which home in the area do you plan on selling? It's kind of assumptive and wraps up all of those types of questions into one. Why do you care? Because depending on their situation, maybe they do have a house in the area, but they're going to keep it. You're going to find out. Maybe they have to sell it. Is it a situation where they have to sell first? Are they going to buy first and sell second? Or are they going to sell first and buy second? How you handle your time and their time is greatly dependent on what your strategy is. And if you don't even know what's going on with their house, you have no strategy.
You know what? I was thinking while you were talking, Julie, one
What?
of the assumptions that we're making is these guys are even pre-qualifying their buyers at all, which is
At
really,
all. I know. Well, I'll show you how sometimes this goes in a coaching call. I'll just put an agent on the spot and say, you've got a new buyer in your pipeline. What must you know about them?
yep,
And
there
we
you
go
go.
back and forth and we see like, where are they at in their learning? What do they know? Well, most of them will go right to, are they already working with an agent? Maybe because they found out the hard way.
Well, let's
That's
define that. If you ask an agent or if you ask a buyer, are you working with an agent? They don't know what the hell working with means, right?
right. That could be anywhere from ran into somebody at an open house to my best friend's a realtor. They don't know what it means.
And if you ask that question at the very beginning of any sort of rudimentary pre-qualifying, and they're just calling to get updated market information on a particular house, they know the game. They're going to say yes, just so they get their information out of you. Even if, let's say they were a home seller and your way you're going about it now is you don't ask if they have a house to sell until, halfway into whatever your script is or whatever your process is. And so you've already lost them because they've already gotten the information they wanted out of you. You've given them no reason whatsoever to stay on the phone with you. And that's what happens. And so you're losing what could potentially be the best aspect of the business. And Julie's touching on it now, is working with sellers that also have to buy, because then you're guaranteed a minimum of 2 transactions and you control the whole process from beginning to end. I mean, that's how you roll. You sell their house, you help. In a lot of markets right now, sellers will take home sale contingencies. So you could actually put them in contract on something that they really love. And maybe it's contingent on the sale of their home. And if it is, guess what? You've got a very motivated seller because they want to buy that next one. Side note, don't make the mistake of assuming they can't qualify to purchase without the sale of their current home. Talk about a motivated seller at the next level. They're okay buying without the sale. They can pay cash for the next one. They've got whatever all squared away. No problems. Don't need to sell the other one. They'd want to sell the other one, but it's not important if they do or they don't. They just assume buy this next one. Put them in, obviously sell them the next house. You guys, some of you are saying, well, let's sell your first one first. No, if they don't have to sell their first one first, you got to put them in the next one. Then you're going to have a very motivated seller to sell the old one. Go ahead, Jules.
Well, so this is important. Don't use your buying and selling mindset on them. Don't be assumptive just because you can't imagine a world where you would have 2 mortgage payments at the same time.
Right.
Or maybe the first house is paid off. You don't use your thinking. You have to ask the questions. I remember another place that I learned that you have to ask the questions of buyer pre-qual is just finding out if they're getting, if they need financing or not. I will never forget. We had a first-time buyer once that I think her price range was like 135 grand. The assumption is she's buying FHA, right? All of our other deals were FHA back then. No, She was a first time buyer at 38 years old and had saved every single thing from her teacher's job until that point so that she could pay cash for a house. My assumption was, because everybody else wasn't, and then I was like, God, that might have been our first cash deal, actually. So, but I remember thinking, well, you never know unless you ask. And that happens. I see this happen a lot on agents that are not used to selling in the luxury markets, because up there, it's very likely that somebody's going to keep their house, like almost always, like my Phoenix clients, because that's a second home market. They can turn it into a VRBO. They're not going to sell that.
Well,
But you don't know if you don't ask, is my point.
But since you mentioned that, so that when you're dealing, if really, really upper end folks, remember what Julie just told you. Don't assume they have to sell their house to buy the next one. Almost never do they have to sell their house to buy the next one. And almost always they'd prefer not to hassle with showings while they're living in their existing house.
Exactly.
If you're presenting the same path forward, because you're not pre-qualifying these guys every single, if you're doing it the same exact way, some script you found online someplace, and you're assuming all your buyers and sellers operate and think the same way. Guys, there are so many people out there right now, especially folks that are the baby boomer types, that have a lot of money, and they've got it from accumulation, and maybe now they're about to get super rich off SpaceX. Who the hell knows? Do not make assumptions. You have to use our buyer pre-qualification script. Julie mentioned this earlier, so this is kind of a fun time to give this to you guys. So when you're calling a buyer back, or the buyer's calling you and you just answer the phone, which is always the best way of going about it, you need to ask, don't get into the weeds with whether they're working with another realtor until you've gotten all the most important questions out of the way. The time frame, do they have a house to sell? How long have you been looking? All the elements of our script. But when you do get to that question, I want you to ask it this way. I assume because you are calling me directly, you're not working with another real estate agent. Now you can modify that and say, I assume that you're calling me directly because you've not committed to another real estate agent, something along those lines. And then you'll find out the truth. But at that point, you've already gotten all the key elements out of them: their names, their phone numbers, their emails, their contacts, whether they have a house to sell, how long they've been looking for a house. So Mr. Seller, on a scale, how long have you been looking for a property? I'm sorry, Mr. Seller, listen to me. Mr. Buyer, how long have you been looking for a property? Oh, we've been looking on and off for about 6 months. 6 months, wow, that's a long time. So in that time you've been looking, have you seen anything you've liked? Well, a couple things, we like this about this one, this about this one. So nothing. Have you made any offers while you've been looking? And you remember what they said. We like the yard on this one. We like the condition on this one. So in the time you've been looking, have you made any offers on any properties? No, we haven't made any offers. Okay, just so that I understand, and this is a buyer that doesn't have a house to sell, by the way. I should have, seeded that, but just so you guys are clear. So Mr. Seller, again, I did it again. I always like talking about sellers. Mr. Buyer, just so that I'm clear, very clear. If I were to show you a house, a property that has that yard you're looking for, has the condition you're looking for, is close to this, is close to that. In other words, it doesn't check 10 out of 10 boxes, because no house ever does. But let's say it's an 8.5 or a 9 out of 10. So it's the house you've been looking for. Mr. Seller, on a scale of 1, Mr. Buyer, on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate your motivation to purchase that property today? Okay. Now, if you take off the places where I screwed up, where I said seller instead of buyer, that's part of the script. Now, what you're going to hear is they're always going to say the same thing, like always. They're going to say a 7, right? A 7. Okay, well, that's terrific, Mr. Buyer. So, Mr. Buyer, what would it take to get you to a 10, right? And then shut up and listen. You guys see what I just did?
They're going to tell you exactly what it's going to take.
Right.
And it's either going to be, find me, the unicorn house that I haven't seen yet.
Unrealistic expectations. That's what they're going to give you. Could be.
Or sometimes it's because they haven't actually pursued their financing, which is also part of your pre-qualification.
We're waiting for SpaceX to go public, and then we're going to pay cash. Might be an answer. They're going to say to what Julie said, well, we're waiting to see if we're getting the relocation or the new assignment if they're working for the government. Or they're going to say, who knows what? They might say, well, we have another property to sell that's a rental property in a different state.
Here's my favorite. We're going to wait for rates to come down.
Well, I mean, then you take the information that they give you, and they'll give you an answer. So on a scale of 1 to 10, if I were to show you the perfect house for you, met all your, criteria, was the property you guys have been hoping for, I found it for you, it's ready to go, it's what you want, on a scale of 1 to 10, where would your motivation be, or how ready are you to purchase that house and close in the next 30 to 60 days? And if they say anything other than a 10, which sometimes they will, then you say, great. So what would a 7? Fantastic. So what would it take to get you to a 10? Well, we need to 1, 2, 3. All right. Just so that I'm clear, these are the 3 things that need to happen before you guys are ready to move forward and purchase a house. And they're going to say yes. And then you have saved yourself a lot of frustration working with a buyer that they knew they weren't ready to purchase a house, but you didn't pre-qualify them. And hell, you're going to go out and show them properties on nights and weekends, even though they had a pig farm and wherever to sell before they would ever buy anything. I remember not knowing this, when Julie and I first started selling real estate, we did, believe it or not, sell over 100 houses our first year selling real estate. I didn't know any of the pre-qualifying script questions. I didn't do anything right. Get this guy in contract. His, lender we weren't working. He wasn't working with a great lender. We were new, making all the mistakes. And then he couldn't close at the last minute. It was like, the week of the closing. Get a call, so-and-so doesn't have his down payment money. The lender didn't even verify he had the damn money. Okay. I'm telling you, all the mistakes, we made them. And then I said, well, what are you talking about? And then the lender said, well, he has to sell. And I had this happen twice. The first time it happened, he has a beer can collection that he needed to sell for his down payment money. I'm like, what? And like, stupid me for not actually having known to ask all the questions now that we give you guys in this pre-qualifying script. And then I had another one along this, probably in the same month. He had to sell, or his grandma or something, had to sell some Persian rugs in Iran for him to come up with this down payment. Now, the funny thing is the beer can guy never ended up doing something. The rug guy ended up buying something from us like a year later. So you never know. But the moral of the story is learn from—
How you learn. That's what
a wise man learns from his mistakes. A brilliant man learns from the mistakes of others. The fastest way up the mountain is to use a pre-qualifying script so you don't make any of the mistakes. And when you're doing the questions, once you've asked the questions and you've gotten the pattern, you'll learn so much more about that buyer. You'll learn, that you may not want to work with them. Maybe they do have realistic and unrealistic expectations. I'll give you another question from the script. They're going to say— we heard this a lot. They'll say, well, I want 5 acres. I want X number of acres. And you're going to go like, okay. And many of you will say, okay, 5 acres. And you're only going to search by 5.
And you'll go hunting for it.
And you're never going to find it, or you're going to find it, but they're never going to like it. So that's exciting, Mr. Seller. Ugh, I cannot stop myself, Julie.
In seller mode.
I'm going to stop trying. That's exciting, Mr. Buyer. So you're thinking about buying something with 5 acres. Can I ask why? Is it you guys have a goat farm? Say something that kind of makes them laugh. And they're going to say, no, we just really like privacy. So what you're saying is what you're looking for is a private setting, and for like the backyard, front yard, the whole thing. You want something that's private, that's situated in such a way that you don't see your neighbors, basically, or you don't see your neighbors unless you want to. And they'll say yes. Well, so if I could find something for you like that was in a normal subdivision, but it was really landscaped, well situated in the neighborhood, that it backed to trees or a reserve, would that be okay? Would that check the boxes for you as far as what you're looking for? Because I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but taking after 1 acre, let alone 5 or 10, that is a lot of work. That's every night and weekend. You're not just buying Mr. Lawn Boy. You're Mr. Lawn Boy yourself. You're gonna have the green outfit, the green hat. You're gonna smell like You guys get the point?
You are John Deere.
You are John Deere, exactly. So you're going to be working constantly taking after, maybe that's your jam. Maybe you want to do it. Maybe you have horses. Maybe you have, when we lived in, north of Austin, we had 2 Highland Dexter mini cows. We wanted to have land, right? We had chickens. Yeah. That's what we wanted.
Right.
So you have to ask these questions that are part of the buyer pre-qualification script. And when you do, you're going to find out, guess what? That buyer, they don't want a lot of land to take after, it turns out. They're more than happy with a 1/4 acre.
They just want privacy.
Right. Now, that may have been a buyer that had been working with another agent, who the other agent was only looking for things with 5 acres and never helped the buyer to focus in their thinking. You guys get it?
They will thank you for bothering to ask.
Totally.
How many people drill down like that? I mean, it's the same thing, if you go to a doctor and they don't ask you what your symptoms are, they just assume because they're a specialist in sore throats, I'll just prescribe for your sore throat. You'd think that person was a quack, right? No, they're going to thank you for drilling down. And we hear this, we're talking a lot about buyers today, but that's also in our listing presentation, is asking lots of questions. And those sellers will always say, I chose you because you were the only one who cared about what was important to us.
Our Starlink in our little cabin up here on the top of the
Getting
mountain
janky, isn't
is
it?
getting janky. Yeah, it's starting to buffer, but your audio sounds good, but it is kind of funny watching you.
I know. I see you that way too. Part of the deal.
Part of the deal. Yes. Hopefully it's still you weren't too distracted by the funny video, but that is what it is. So open your mind to the reality. So rule number one, if you wanted to have a fast turnaround in your business, this is related to what we're just talking about. Rule number one that we do if we were personally coaching you is Julie and I would, or any of our coaches would take you through the gauntlet of making you validate that every single one of your buyers had been completely pre-qualified, completely, their motivation, all the things. In other words, you had taken them through the whole pre-qual process, and it turns out they're great buyers. Maybe they're straight buyers, have nothing to sell, but nonetheless. And then you'd say, well, I'll tell you another little weak spot where, a lot of agents make mistakes is trusting the lender. Sorry, lenders, true. So, and this is where you need to use our ultimate addendum. And without telling you guys the story, because many of you have heard it before, the hardship that went into us discovering that we needed an ultimate addendum. Julie, can you give them a synopsis of what it is actually all about and why they need to be using it? Because normally listing agents are using the ultimate addendum. Buyers agents need to be using it when they're actually pre-qualifying their buyers too, or making sure their lender didn't send them a flaky, lazy, Larry the lazy lender letter.
That's right. Well, I'll try and do it succinctly because the, elaborate version lives in coaching.
Right.
So as a buyer's agent, you want to use it as a checklist to make sure you really understand where your buyer is in the process. The checklist is all of the things that actually go into underwriting. Underwriting is where they check things and they verify. So before I go into that, let me just, because we have some newer agents listening too, and some confused agents, because it is confusing. There are 3 levels of lending. One is pre-qualifying. Second level up is pre-approval. And then you have loan commitment. If somebody's pre-qualified, it means virtually nothing. And a lot of agents and even lenders and processors will use those terms interchangeably, pre-qualified and pre-approved, right? So you have to know where they're at. But what happens at the 11th hour is when they actually check everything. That's called underwriting. And that's what leads you to loan commitment. Loan commitment is what you want, where it's only contingent on identifying the property and appraising. Okay. So the ultimate addendum is a checklist of those things, their ratios, their down payment, not just that they say their down payment exists, but it's been verified. They've sent the banking information, that their employment has been checked. Pre-qualifying is, I work for Cirque du Soleil in Las Vegas and I make 10 grand a month and I've got a contract. Okay.
You can tell we have rental properties in Las Vegas based on what she just said.
That was a real one. So maybe somebody says that, but has it been verified? Do I actually see evidence of the pay in the contract? That doesn't happen until, and it's not your fault, it's not lender's fault, it's how they operate. They typically don't go that deep in a file until you've made it through the inspections, because if it's going to die during inspections, why would they spend all this time on the file?
Remember what she just said. That is the most important thing, because you're not going to understand why Larry's being lazy, and you're not even going to know he is, because they're trained, not by us, they're trained to not actually put any real effort into the file until you have put them in contract on a house.
And have made it through inspections too. They'll crank out a lender letter all day long so that you can get in contract. That doesn't mean that it's a done deal.
One thing you also, Julie, this is another tricky thing, is that the nature of their employment. So they might have a job. Sure enough, Bob has a great job, but if Bob, and it depends on, I don't know if the FHA rules are on him, I don't remember, but I think if it's a new job within 6 months, and if it's not within the same industry as it was previously, which is really common nowadays, that could be, depending on the overall situation with the borrower, another red flag that could prevent him from, so if the guy was a candlestick maker and he just decided to become a, who knows what, it's something completely different, an insurance salesman, totally new industry, that might be enough for the lender, if his credit's not really great, for the lender not to be able to get the loan underwritten. Yes, Jules.
Yeah, well, so these conversations, it's one thing leads to the next, right? So if my current job that I'm new at isn't related to my previous job, I don't really have a job history doing this, that's great that I have a job. But because that doesn't meet the pre-qualification or the pre-approval standards of that lender, what does that lead to? It means I have to put more money down. Now, is that maybe more than I was planning on? Has that been verified? Or maybe I'm no longer qualified to purchase at 650, I can only go to 600.
Yep.
So that's why I
Or
was
the
trying to
opposite too.
succinctly.
The opposite could be true too. They may have worked with Larry, the lazy lender, and he said they can only go up to 650, but it turns out that they actually could qualify for more. So you might be out there trying to, show them houses that they're not going to buy for 650, but they're all in at 8. And you could actually, because Larry was being lazy initially, that's how it all works. And that's what the ultimate addendum is all about. The ultimate addendum, our buyer pre-qualification process, is designed to make it so that the buyers do have to go through a process with you. They do have to qualify to purchase the property. That's the lender's part. But they also have to qualify in order to work with you. In other words, they have to have the highest level of motivation. They have to have realistic expectations. They have to be people, frankly, that you want in your life for however long it takes to find a house. These are all important things, and that's part of the buyer process. So listen, guys, we're going to wrap up the show for today. Remember to subscribe to the newsletter, harrisrealestatedaily.com. And if you got even one little thing from the show today, please remember to give us a 5-star review over on iTunes or Spotify. And if you're listening to us on YouTube, especially because we're entertaining you with our startling stall outs on the camera, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. We did split our YouTube channels, and one is all the old channels just for the shorts and the reels. The new one is for the long form. And the new one we just launched like 2 weeks ago, but it's already getting a lot of traction. So if you want to watch us make fun of each other on the podcast, we videotape it, obviously. Videotape it, listen to me. We do record it every single day, and it is on the new YouTube channel, so you can find that, obviously, over on YouTube. In the meantime, thank you for keeping this out. I'm still amazed when I say this, but it's true. If you go to iTunes and you put in the word real estate, we're one of the top, usually 5, sometimes 7, sometimes 3 podcasts in the world under real estate. That's incredible. And it's because of all of you. So thank you for allowing Julie and I to stand in alignment with our highest and truest purpose on this planet, which is being of service to all of you. Now, your highest and truest purpose on this planet as a real estate professional is to be of service to your clients. Learn how to pre-qualify them. If they're not checking all the boxes of someone that can buy a house financially or will buy a house emotionally, then you need to not work with them so that you can then only work with the folks that are the most motivated to buy and ideally also have homes to sell. Thank you for listening today, guys. Have a fantastic day. We'll talk with you on the show tomorrow. Hello, thank you for having watched this video. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
That's right. And don't forget to hit that like button, leave your comments and questions below, and we will get right back with you.
Thank you for watching this video. And remember to watch the next one. You're going to love that one.